Hi. Thank you for joining us for the Get Up Stand Up panel at the Roxbury Film Festival. I hope you've already taken the opportunity to see a number of the wonderful films we had on the schedule and plan to come back later on and see more. One of the reasons that we put on the festival is because we recognized that there really was a gap in the information and the images that we were regularly being fed, and what we see on TV, what we see in the movies. Oftentimes our faces are missing, or the faces that we see we don't feel are very reflective or representative of us, or they're saying things that we find disturbing or promoting ideas that we might find disturbing. So that's one of the reasons that we're having this panel. We wanted to talk about, as an audience and also as filmmakers, for those of us here that work within the industry, what are some of the things that we can do? What are some of the things that bother us? We have a great panel here today, and I will introduce them all individually in a second. But what I would like to do is start off by showing a very brief clip, which is from the work of one of our panelists. It is somewhat of a sneak preview. This piece has not yet been released, and it will be appearing sometime in the future on PBS. I believe it's part of the TVS series. And it's called Beyond Beats and Rhymes. It's by filmmaker Byron Hurt, and it deals a lot with images of masculinity in hip-hop music. So we're going to just watch that clip, and then I'll introduce all the panelists, ask them to come to the stage. But before I do that, can I just ask the audience members, would you please kindly move down closer to the front? We'd love to have as intimate a discussion as we can and feel as connected to you as we can. The other thing I'd like to announce is that this session is being webcast on WGBH's website. And so by coming to ask a question as audience members, you are giving your permission to have your image and voice webcast on the website. I hope that doesn't scare too many of you. The other thing that I'd like to ask you to do is that when you do ask your questions, because it's being webcast and we want to pick up your voices as clearly as possible, if you can come to this microphone right here to your right, my left, and ask your questions. Again, I hope that this won't dissuade you from coming. Just make your way around. We're all friends and family here. So once again, we're going to see a brief clip, and then I will invite the panelists to the stage. Thank you. Might I invite the panelists to come up and take a seat, and I will introduce you as you're seated. It's a little tight. No, oh yes, I know. So I will just tell you a little bit about our panelists, moving from my right, my right towards the left. Our first panelist is Nina La Negra. Many of you know Nina. She's a hometown folk. Nina is a Roxbury resident and a producer of critical thinking media messages and vehicles for nearly 3 decades. She's hosted 7 different talk series in the greater Boston area for both radio and television, broadcast, cable, as well as satellite. Nina has received lots of accolades and awards from the community, media industry, and educators, and her recent work includes coordinating the Robeson Social Justice Summer Institute, which is a 3-day regional institute for organizers, educators, and youth leaders with national and international presenters. And her current interests are in the performing arts, live venues, and filmmaking. And Nina would like us all to know that she's especially happy when young people that she's influenced pursue their dreams and they remember that she cares about them. Thank you, Nina. Next to Nina is Byron. Byron Hurt is the young filmmaker whose film you just saw. Byron is native of New York and is a producer of the underground classic award-winning documentary I Am a Man, which we screened twice here at the Roxbury Film Festival because the demand was so high after we screened it the first time. The subtitle of the film is called It's Black Masculinity in America. Byron is currently producing and directing Beyond Beats and Rhymes, which is the clip you just saw, it's a documentary film about machismo and rap music and hip-hop culture. Byron has a diverse background in media. He has work experience in broadcast, television, print, public relations, and long-form documentary. In Boston, he worked for WBZ, WHDH-TV, and WCVB-TV. And he was a reporter for the Patriot Ledger and also worked as a media relations specialist at Northeastern University. In New York, Byron worked on the American Experience PBS documentary, Marcus Garvey, Look for Me in the Whirlwind. Okay. And beside Byron is S. Pearl Sharp. S. Pearl's work focuses on cultural arts, health, and Black history. As an independent filmmaker, she created the semi-animated short Picking Tribes with artist Carlos Spivey, which won 4 national awards, including the Newark Museum Film Festival's Paul Robeson Award and the Black American Cinema Society's first prize. It screened on PBS series POV and Independent Eye and on the Learning Channel. Her other films include Life as a Saxophone, which is an hour documentary on poet Kamau Daoud, the controversial women's health video It's Okay to Peak, created with Arabella Shavers Julian, and Back Inside Herself, a poetic short. Her most recent work is The Healing Passage, Voices from the Water, a feature-length documentary that addresses the present-day residuals of the transatlantic slave trade through the work of cultural artists. We're screening it tomorrow at the Museum of Fine Arts at 3 o'clock, along with In Time, one of the short films that we just showed tomorrow. So if you missed In Time, and even if you didn't miss In Time, you do have to come and see S. Pearl's video tomorrow at the Museum of Fine Arts at 3 o'clock. Thank you for joining us. The panelist beside S. Pearl is Jessica Lynn. Jessica is a young filmmaker whose film we showed this morning as part of the youth produced series. Jessica first began working with film when she subtitled dialogue for Asian language pieces and wrote and directed a small commercial piece. Her passion for filmmaking grew when she became enrolled in the ICA Fast Forward program and created her first film piece, Wo Shi Mei Gu Ren. I hope I pronounced that correctly. You can correct me when you speak. And her second, Below the Surface. She's currently enrolled at Boston University, even though she's only 17 years old, and where she hopes to continue with her filmmaking. We're very proud of Jessica. Thank you for joining us. So I think I'd like to start off by asking the panelists to tell us a little bit more about themselves. And Nita, I'll start with you. Maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about your media and cultural activist work and what led up to it. What inspires you, those kinds of things. Do you mind sharing this microphone with me?
I haven't shared much with Byron in a while, so it's a great pleasure. So let's see. What led up to it? What led up to the...
Or what inspired?
What inspired? As you heard from the introduction, I've been doing television and radio stuff for a while, and one of the things that inspired me to do media literacy work was a tour that I was doing at a television station for young people, and they were in the 8th grade, and all the boys ran toward the equipment, and all the girls hung back. And when I saw that, I said, something is wrong. We are going to change the rules in here. All of the boys line up on the back wall, and all the girls sit up next to the equipment. And we couldn't change until every girl had touched every button they wanted to touch on the equipment. And so that was kind of like the beginning of the media literacy stuff. But in terms of the critical thinking piece, I think the reporter got it almost right. I'm not a Fort Hill resident in that Boston Globe article. I live in Roxbury, though. My critical thinking piece started very young. Our television viewing as a child was very monitored. My parents only permitted us to watch 1 hour of television a week, and there were 5 of us, and we had to come to consensus over what we would watch. So you can imagine we had to watch whatever my oldest brother said we were going to watch. Star Trek, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, that kind of stuff. And we couldn't really enjoy it because my dad would sit down and watch TV with us and say things like, that's not real. that would never happen here. And so what that did, besides annoy the hell out of all of us, was create this critical voice in our heads. And it's still with me today. And my own children won't watch television with me or go to the movies. But I know that they also have that critical voice in their heads.
Thank you. And so I think I might just go straight down the line in this question. Byron, as I mentioned, we showed your film, I Am a Man, a few years ago at the Roxbury Film Festival. And this film seems to touch on a lot of similar issues. How is it that you got working on issues of black masculinity? I mean, you talked a little bit about why you did this film, but maybe you can talk more broadly about what inspires your work.
Okay. Well, I majored in journalism at Northeastern, radio and television broadcasting, and my goal when I was, a junior, senior year in college was to come out of college and to be on television, working as a reporter or an anchor person. I mean, that was like what my ambition was at the time. And several things happened in between the time that I graduated and now. And one of those things was that I was hired by the Center for the Study of Sports Society to use my, my status as a former college athlete to inspire men to speak out about men's violence against women, all forms of men's violence against women, which was an issue that I knew very little about outside of my own experiences, just growing up and being a man and being socialized and conditioned to be, quote unquote, a man in American culture, and being a black man inside of American culture, a white-dominated, white supremacist, culture. And so I started learning all these different things about the representations of manhood, the representations of masculinity, gender politics, and things of that nature. And it was something that really sparked my interest. And I felt like there was a great need to educate other brothers about, just the way that men, black men in particular, are socialized and conditioned to see manhood, masculinity. And so I decided to join my two sort of interests, the gender studies, gender politics, and the journalism, along with my interest of, uplifting, I would say uplifting, but giving back to my community or, my commitment to my own community. And so I decided that I was going to make films that focused on masculinity or gender politics. And I just think that it's a very interesting and very important way to reach boys and men of color. Men in general, women as well, everybody. But, I wanted to really focus on men because I had been affected, and I felt like if I had been affected through media, through the power of media, then I could really, really help to raise consciousness, push consciousness, and things like that. And I think that's one of the very important aspects of television and film and radio, is that you get to reach so many people at once. Not so many people read books and magazines like we're supposed to, or that we used to. We watch television, we go to movies, we watch films and things like that. So I just thought it was a very powerful way to reach people. And so that's kind of like how I did it. And the reason why I carried on the same theme as my first film was because in my first film, I Am a Man, I didn't really deal with hip-hop in that film. And so hip-hop was growing in popularity. Hip-hop was growing in its appeal across the board internationally. And I was seeing, the gender politics in rap music are just so rich in images, all of that kind of stuff. And I just felt like I got to do it. I got to make a film about masculinity and hip-hop. And that's how I arrived at the theme.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
My introduction to the power of the media, I think, came in the very late 50s when Malcolm X made his first national appearance on television. He was being interviewed by Edward Murrow. And there was this sense of tension in the black community that this was going to happen. Were they going to just, wipe him away on television? Would he hold his own? Would he say something that was going to embarrass us? Because everybody had sides at that time about whether Malcolm X was a good representative figure of us or not. And I remember being young, sitting on the floor at the feet of my family, looking at the television, but also looking over my shoulder to see how they were responding, because however they responded was going to be my barometer about how I responded, and being very aware of how important a moment this was in our community's history and development, that a figure as political and outspoken as Malcolm would have a moment on primetime television. As we moved through the civil rights movement, one of the things that became clear was that the things that were happening in the civil rights movement had been happening for centuries in this country, but they hadn't been on television. And so for the first time, the entire world was beginning to see what was happening in the South and in the North in terms of the sicking dogs on people and the brutality and the guns and the marshals. All of this was finally being seen by everybody on television. So it was validated as it was happening almost in a way that had not happened before. So that kind of elevated, again, my understanding of the power of the media. In the 1980s, I was one of the co-founders of an organization called the Black Anti-Defamation Coalition. We did not start out with that name. We started out as a group of actors and writers in Hollywood and community people who wanted to protest a series called Beulaland that was being made by NBC Television. And in the process of that ongoing protest and being able to make some changes in that program, we created the organization to address the image of blacks in the media. And the lessons that we learned were very important. Some of them I will share with you later in the panel, but the 5 or 6 years that we worked with that organization were very informative to me about how our community, first of all, sees and very often misunderstands the control of the media, and then tends to be totally unaware of the psychological effect of the media on them. So you'll have a few people, a few pockets of understanding, but not the mass understanding that we needed to develop, and that was a lot of the work that we did.
Thank you. And Jessica, if you could talk a little bit, similar vein, maybe what inspired you or attracted you to working in film and video and using it as a means to communicate?
I think in my childhood, and part of my family, we would always watch or rent like 2 movies every week, and we'd just watch it. And I think watching those films really drew me to filmmaking because the power of it, like, you can inspire people and draw emotions from people, and it's thought-provoking. And I think I wanted to reach and touch people and tell them a story. And even if they don't agree with me necessarily, I think just letting them think for themselves or think from it, even if they don't agree with me or anything, then I think I could hope that my films have those traits in them.
Oh, that's great. And so I'm going to actually ask the next question to you, Jessica. Sorry to put you on the spot. But do you think that filmmakers or audiences, you can address both or one or the other if you like, have a specific responsibility when they're producing the work that they do? And if you do believe that, what do you think that responsibility is?
I think filmmakers definitely have the responsibility because they have the outlet and they have the voice, and they can use that power to teach people, and especially the ignorance people feel or face nowadays, that I think it's very important that we use that power to teach and enlighten people.
Thank you. I'd like to turn that question over to Nina, too, if you don't mind. Can you give us your perspective on what you think?
About responsibility?
Yeah, and maybe you can speak as both an audience member and as a media maker yourself.
Well, I think everybody has responsibility as human beings on the planet, and the question is, do people live up to it? I think in media that there's a lot of abdication of responsibility, and that's part of the capitalist system. That we must exploit regardless of what pain and suffering it causes in the lives of human beings. So as filmmakers, I think, or media people, I think that that the responsibility is to choose. You know, are you going to contribute to the exploitation or re-amplify the noise, as I call it, or are you going to shift the paradigm? And as audience members, as receptors of this information or energy, Are you going to continue to ingest toxins and wait until your liver gives out and you expire? Or are you going to go on a health food diet and change your substance intake?
Interesting. Yeah. So, if then, just to piggyback on Nina's question, and maybe I'll ask Byron if you want to take this up, if all you feel that you're seeing on television and in the movies are these toxins that you no longer want to ingest, and as we know, the conglomerate of the media industry is quite large and powerful in this country, do we think it's a valid goal to attempt to change that entire industry, or should we focus more on trying to build alternative networks and distributions? I'm going to ask Byron to take it first, and then if you want to respond after you've had a while to think about it, I'll throw it back to you.
All right. Well, I mean, this is what I think, and I just want to just piggyback off of what Nina was saying a second ago. I can speak for myself and say that I personally feel a special obligation to create social media, socially progressive media, because I feel like I have the consciousness to do it, and I have the will to do it, and I have the ambition to do it. Not everybody has that consciousness, that will, that determination, that drive, that ambition to do that. Even if they do have the consciousness, they may put that aside so that they can achieve monetary goals, monetary ambition, that sort of thing. But as for me personally, I know I can never do that. I was at a conference, a hip-hop and feminism conference, and I think his name is Jesse Terrio, something like that. The guy who directed Soul Plane. Oh. And, he was on a panel, and I was watching him, and I heard him say, he also produces music videos, hip-hop music videos, and he said that, all I do is, I go to the set, or, I work with the artist, and I do what the artist wants me to do. That's my job, is to do exactly what the artist wants me to do, to bring to the screen what the artist wants me to do. And see, I could never do that. You know what I mean? Because I have certain, for lack of a better word, principles, that I feel like I can't cross. And I think that is a result of my commitment to my community and where I come from. And not only that, but the education that I have been afforded by intelligent, insightful professors, teachers, educators who have schooled me and educated me on the historical context of the image that was constructed not by us, but by other people who had the means and the power to create images, mass distribute them in order to maintain a certain status quo, a social order. And, when you have that sort of awareness that has been given to you, it's very difficult to make a choice that will lead you down the road to make a Soul Plane or to make music videos that, degrade or that what I'm talking about, just that degrade, as opposed to present like a more socially progressive or positive side of the black experience. So I mean, I think it's incumbent upon every person to make a personal choice about which way that you are going to go. Many people make certain choices because they don't really have any other tools to make different conscious choices. You know what I mean? But to answer your question, I just wanted to say that. But to answer your question, I just feel that. What was the question again?
Do you think is it a worthwhile goal to attempt to change the whole industry?
Yeah.
Should we even try doing that?
Yeah, I think it's hard and as difficult as it is. I think that we must continue to do that, to try and change the industry by whatever means that we can. At least have the hope and the wherewithal to believe that we can do it, despite the fact that corporate culture and corporate media is basically kicking our ass right now, and they're presenting many images of black people, of people in general, that maintain that social order, maintain a status quo, and it's a very difficult fight because more often than not, the huge corporate conglomerates are dictating and controlling what we see more than ever before. But I think that the fight must continue because, as Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without demand, right? And that you must agitate, agitate, agitate. I think one of the problems that we're seeing right now, and something that concerns me, and something that also affects me, is that I think people feel disempowered because I think in this particular day and age, the time that we live in with the administration that is in office, and just the sort of neoconservative movement, I think is making people feel much more disempowered than ever before. The resistance is there, but the results of the resistance are not really there, in my opinion. People still protest, people still write letters, people still call radio stations, people still challenge and things like that, but corporate media never shows it. Corporate media never pays attention to it, and so we don't feel like we're really going anywhere. We're not getting anywhere. But I think that will change because I think at a certain point, we can only take so much as a society, and the more we begin to see that things are not going well with the war, with the gas prices, with all these different things, the more we will begin to challenge the administration and the things that we see. I think one successful example of that is when PBS was under attack by the conservatives, and they were going to slash $100 million or something like that. I think it was $100 million, and people had online petitions. People called. I called, my local congressman, and I said, I need, you need to save PBS, and it worked. I mean, the funding was saved. It's still under assault, but the people had something to say about it, and the people were able to make sure that it didn't, get cut. So I think that there is hope and there is potential for change to happen. You just have to really stay on it and not give up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Did you want to start again?
I think Byron and I might be coming from the same school of thought in a lot of areas, and hope is a very important thing to encourage in people, and that if one were plugged into media 24/7 like many of the young people are in the society and around the world, one would become hopeless because there's a steady stream of negativity that's bombarding their consciousness, that's bombarding their psyche, that's bombarding their spirit. And that is not by accident. That is definitely very conscious, very purposeful by these multinational corporations. And so does that mean that there's nothing good in the media? No. But I think you have to be very, very, very selective about what you allow into your home, what you allow into your mind, and what you allow into the minds and hearts and souls of your children. Because just like the computer saying garbage in, garbage out, if you continue to allow a steady stream of debased and degrading images and messages, then that's the vibrational energy that your children are going to walk around with. That's what you're going to walk around with. And we have a dire responsibility to the planet to not regenerate that negativity. You can see by the horrible war that's happening in Iraq, if you want to call it a war. I call it an invasion. You can see by what's happening in the Middle East, the so-called Middle East. You can see by the devastation in Niger, the planned starvation. You can see by the trafficking of children and women and men and for work and for sex. You can see by all the social injustice in this world that the media does nothing but, for the most part, pick up on that negativity, re-amplify it, and feed it right back into the minds of people. So it's okay. And I'm sorry I have to make this comment. And we're here at the Roxbury Film Festival. I'm very pleased to be here. I think the organizers do a fabulous job. But I had to walk out of a film yesterday because I would not be assaulted by what I was seeing on the screen. And that is, I can turn on TV anytime and see a black woman being assaulted, raped, or degraded. So now I come to the Roxbury Film Festival and I see that in the first 12 and a half minutes of a film, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. And I walk out. And that's what I think more people have to do. You have to walk out. You have to speak with your pocketbook. You have to speak with your letter writing. You have to speak with your phone calling. You have to organize people in your community. And you have to say, no, enough is enough. And it does behoove us. I mean, if you want to use biblical terms, which is not common for me to do, but if you want to use biblical terms, they had a character named David against a character named Goliath. Goliath was a giant. The multinational corporations are giants. And we, the people, are David. But David slew the giant.
I just want to stay on that question for a minute and ask S. Pearl about your work with the Black Anti-Defamation League. Some of us aren't familiar with the program Beulah Land. I don't know, maybe you can fill us in on what it was about, and maybe address the question of, Byron and Nina talked about the fact that sometimes it feels like, in some ways you're hitting up against a brick wall when you're trying to change this massive industry. Do you feel that what do you think are appropriate ways nowadays that we can even go against that, or do you feel that we should invest more in alternative networks?
Well, I think we have to do both. The filmmakers who are here need your support. I personally have expected much larger turnouts here at Boston, so I'm saying, where is the community supporting the young? Where are the community supporting her? It's her first film. Sister I met in the back, who did a film on domestic violence, her first film. Where is the support of the community? It's in your coming out. It's in your bringing these filmmakers to your community and showing their film and having dialogue about them, if it's a documentary or if it's a subject, documentary or drama, a subject. There was dialogue stimulated this afternoon about In Time, the question of clitoridectomy. There are other films out there. And, who's doing that background? Who's bringing that group together to have that discussion? Because that is an issue for black women in this community, right here in Boston, in LA, wherever you are. It's still an issue. So that kind of support, the filmmakers, the creative artists are trying to do the work, but we need the backup. And I say to people frequently, don't give me another plaque as an award. Find a creative way to support whatever it is you're trying to honor. Give me a gift certificate to a business that I have to deal with. Give me a subscription to a magazine in my line of business. Give me the latest book that's coming out in my field. Give me a check. It may be small, but we know how to use it. We can't use another plaque. We can't use another one of those certificates from the city. So the support starts there. Okay, now thank you. That was my bandstand. I got that off my chest. Now, one of the things that we found with the Black Anti-Defamation Coalition was that we, first of all, had to educate our community about how the industry was working. They felt that if they saw black people on television in leading roles, that those people were in charge of everything and calling the shots and making all the money. And that very often was not true. The series, The Jeffersons, and yes, you'll hear me make some old references, but the Black Anti-Defamation Coalition actually existed from 80 to about 86, and that's where I did the most intense work during that period. During the entire period that The Jeffersons was on the air, there was never a black producer. Okay, never a black producer, never a black associate producer. Those are the people who call the shots. There were some black writers eventually, but not when it started. Okay, so you have to look at that. Who is behind the scenes? Who's doing the work? We found out that if we went to the top, we could have more success. So we got to stop picketing, folks. It ain't working anymore. The picketing is over. That time worked in its period. It's over. They're standing in their windows with their bulletproof glasses, looking out the window, watching you doing that and laughing and moving on to whatever else it is they are planning. We went to the top. We would go, if there was a black person involved in a project, we would go to them first and say, this is our grievance. And some of the projects we worked on, for example, besides Beulah Land, one was the film of Malcolm X that you saw that Spike Lee produced and Denzel starred in. There was an attempt to make that film 10 years ago with a white director, white conductor, white producers, and Richard Pryor playing Malcolm X. And we said, we don't think so. And so we got organized and we went first to the Shabazz family. And we said, we have a problem with this. And the Shabazz family said, this producer, Marvin Worth, who is white, is the same producer who made the documentary on Malcolm X, and he has our complete faith and trust. And he has the green light from our family. And we still said, we don't think so. And then we went to the producer, and he would not have any discussion. And then we went to the community, and we were able to say, we already ran this past Betty Shabazz. We already ran this past the producers. If you agree with us that this is not the way this should go down, then we need to start a very organized protest. So that was one of the projects that we were successfully able to stop. When Webster, a television series, came on the air, we said, we don't need another black child because we already had different strokes. We don't need another black child without a black family, without their own family. And so we started that. By going to the top, by going to the executives, if we decided, by going to the top, what we did, we found out who is the top-ranking person at NBC or CBS. We send them a cable. We send them something that they have, somebody in their office has to sign for, a certified letter stating our position and what we are asking for. Very often we protest, we say, we don't want this, we want the end of that, but we don't ask what we want. What we were asking for. So you have to be very clear about that. If they met with us, then we had a small group that went in and each person had a function. One person represented the community. If they were going to throw something at us, this person could speak on the behalf of the community. We had a psychologist who worked with us who did a lot of specific work in the media. He could speak from the psychological, scientific, medical position. This is the psychological effect that what you're doing is going to have on our children, on our community. Some of us represented the industry. This is what's happening in the industry. So if they said, well, it's too late for us to reshoot that, one of the other people or myself could say, no, it isn't. You can do ABC. You can put a camera here. You can do so-and-so. You can do such and such. Because we knew the business from the industry side, from the production side. And so we would role play before we had a meeting. What if they say so-and-so? What if they ask so-and-so? What if they say, well, we can't do this? What if they challenge us on so-and-so? We would role play in a room for 3 or 4 hours the night before we went into that meeting with that network or that production company. And through that process, we got results until pretty soon they stopped calling us that group of folks or those unemployed writers and actors, and they began to address us as the Black Anti-Defamation Coalition because they knew they had to deal with us in a particular way. We did all of this without going to the press normally. So a lot of times we made changes in things that the public on a large scale never found out about. We also had connections with organizations that already existed in other cities. We didn't try to reinvent the wheel. So we knew there was a very conscious group in Dallas, Third Eye, and we had a hookup with them. We knew there was a group in Chicago. We knew there was a group in Cleveland. We hooked up with these organizations. If something was going down, we let them know. And they were ready to step in on their level with their stations or their producers in their cities, with their committees, with their groups, and add to the numbers. So when we said to them, if you do this, we will have 50,000 people protesting, or we will have 200,000 people protesting. We didn't know where all those people were coming from, but we knew we had cities lined up with key chapters and people who were thinking like we were thinking, who were ready to respond. So those were some of the ways that we got some successes in some of the projects that we tackled, and those means and those ways of working are still valid. We have to stop doing the grandstand approach and find out who is it that is in control that you have to talk to. If you're going to call a boycott, you need to know what that means. You need to know who you're trying to boycott. What are the legal ramifications? They have changed the rules. They can sue your ass off now for calling a boycott. You have to know how to get around that. You have to know that before you call a boycott against a product, if there's a show you're trying to deal with, there are advertising mediums that do not want to be, the advertiser does not want to be associated with something negative, whether it's going to be, whether it's going to have a good result or not. They don't want scandal. They don't want stress. So we found out if we went to one of the 2 major advertising magazines, the Bibles, one comes out every day, one comes out once a week, and said, this is what we're looking at. We have a problem with this program, and it is sponsored by A, B, C, and D. Those magazines would let those sponsors know. They'd know before the network knew that we had a problem, and they would be ready to talk to us. So research the ways that you can deal in a very professional, calm, educated way and be prepared to say, this is what we don't want, this is also what we want. There was a picture with Gary Coleman where he was a little boy and he had dreams. And somebody got the script and all of his heroes were white. And we said, wait a minute, he's up there having a fantasy about John Wayne being his cowboy. What happened to Deadwood Dick? So when we met with them, we had to go buy at our own expense a huge poster from the Western States Black Research Center of Deadwood Dick, because we knew she had one over there. And we presented it to the to the studio, and they didn't reshoot a dialogue scene, but they reshot scenes where they panned his room so that you saw Magic Johnson. He had all white basketball players. Hello? So, they got a Magic Johnson poster. We got them the Deadwood Dick poster. They reshot those images, so when they cut away to what he was seeing some black people in his room. If we hadn't done that, this show would have been on the air with this little boy having all white heroes as fantasy. So these things are still happening. They haven't stopped. I'm using old references, but it's still happening today. And it's worse because they're coming at you not only in network television, they're coming at you with cable. They're coming at you with internet. They're coming at you with home video. Every possible corner that you can look at, something is being bombarded at you to program yourself, and you need to keep your antenna up and be prepared to deal with that.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to actually throw this one to Byron, since your film is eventually going to air on PBS, and I assume that you got grants from a number of different organizations just to, okay, well, we could talk about that, to do your film. But the question is really about, when you are working within the industry, how do you have to think about having access to resources? Are there rules that you have to play by within the industry in order to make sure that you have access to those resources? Is it a balancing act, so to speak? Maybe you can talk about that.
Well, I've been very fortunate in that I have been funded by two funders. My funders are the Independent Television Service and the National Black Programming Consortium. And, money is very difficult to come by. You have a handful of people in my case, filmmakers of color who are basically competing for and, trying to scrape money from the same resources. So it is very difficult. So I've been very blessed and fortunate to receive any kind of funding, and I'm very happy about that. But I know that it is very much a privilege, I've also been lucky in that no one has ever really, to this point, thus far, told me that I can't interview this person, or I can't show this shot, or I can't have this scene or segment in my film because it's too heavy. I've never had that so far, and so I'm very happy about that. I don't have any real horror stories, but the only thing I will say is this: I do believe, and I feel like my deal with PBS and this film being aired nationally on PBS is in some real serious jeopardy, because I think that PBS is very skittish about the attacks that they have been receiving from the right, and they're concerned about their funding. And so my film contains material, segments, images that are considered to be hot issues. And so I am concerned that I will get into some sort of battle or fight with PBS in terms of whether or not the film is going to be aired or not. Having said that, I don't really think that it would be such a bad thing if it's not aired on PBS, because I feel like the film has legs to work outside of PBS. It's a matter of finding the right distribution, the right means of exploitation to make sure that the film is seen by the right audiences. And to be honest with you, the only reason why I even submitted for funding to have my film aired on PBS is because I knew that it was one of the only reasonable and realistic outlets that would air the type of cutting-edge documentary that I wanted to produce. A critical film about hip-hop, from someone who loves hip-hop, from someone who comes from within the culture, but is pointing the camera inward to ourselves to say, let's challenge some of these debased images that are being projected of us, right? So I knew that PBS was the only outlet that was going to air it. I knew BET was not going to air my film if I submitted my proposal to them. I knew MTV wasn't going to air my film because I'm deconstructing the images that they are projecting. Same person. Well, it's Viacom, right? It's the same. Right. It's the same. Same multinational corporation. So, it is very much a challenge to get funded and to get funded for something that is quote unquote progressive, or quote unquote critical or challenging, especially if you're doing something that's challenging the media. So It's tough. It can be
Yes, I
done,
would
but
lo-
it's tough.
I throw it out to anybody else who wants to answer that question.
Yeah, I want Jessica to talk too, because she's not talking. So, but I have to say this as being an official member of the Say It Loud Club, which is one of the last places I got fired from, and that is that if you are trying to make something that is not re-amplifying the noise. Maybe you have not been censored yet, Byron, but I've been censored many times. And proud of it. Because that tells me I'm saying the right thing and I'm doing the right thing. But what that requires is that you must have a value system that is stronger than driving the latest SUV and sporting the latest bling bling. And I want to be in Hollywood with all my friends. You know, I mean, you've got to have a sensibility that's deeper than that. And so the point that you raised about BET and MTV, it's the same person. Sumner Redstone went to Boston Latin, went to Harvard Law, and owns half of the multinational corporations that control media in the world. VH1, CBS, Nickelodeon, Nick at Night, what? I mean, the list is unreal. Viacom.
You go on their website, the logos come up. There are like 36 logos on the page.
It's incredible.
All owned by this one company.
One individual. And no one knows his net worth because he lives in New York and his wife lives here in Massachusetts. And the fear is that if she knows the real value, she'll finally divorce him and get half. So, I mean, that's real. So if you're going to make films or if you're going to make media that is going to uplift or change, then you have to be prepared to come up with some alternative distribution methodologies. And what Ms. Pearl was talking about, that whole, there's a group in New York called CMOTAP, the Committee to Eliminate Media Offensive to African People. And they came up here to Boston, and I was in the office when this happened, to Harvard University, to Skip Gates' office, because of that horrendous thing that he did on PBS around Africa. And they called him out. Now, they had an appointment with him for several months, but suddenly he had a medical emergency. He had to leave when he found out that they were actually there with a busload of people from New York. So, and I've got this on videotape. So, what I'm trying to say about that is you have to be prepared to challenge the status quo if you're trying to make images or messages, or if you want to see images and messages that speak to you as a human being. You know, that uplift you in a way and don't degrade you. I'm a big one for humor, and I'll be the first one to tell you that Dave Chappelle is one of my favorite comedians now, and I didn't like him when he first came out, when he was making those horrific movies, and some of the stuff he does is over the top. But he is raising a lot of consciousness around a lot of issues that America needs to take a look at, the dirty laundry that we need to examine. And so there needs to be more discussion around that. So I'm just curious, as a young person, I want to toss the question to Jessica, if Julia doesn't mind. Do you feel like you can get your story told, regardless of what it is that you have to say, Jessica?
I think I get it told. It just depends on whether or not people will listen, or if they or have any opinions on it or care about it at all. Because at the teenage standpoint, not many people will listen to us because we're younger, and they feel that what we say doesn't really matter. And I think that it's important for teenage filmmakers, because we have voices and we have opinions, that we should use that outlet to tell people, especially for teenagers, because they're so easily susceptible to all of the vulgar and degrading images in media right now. And I think that if they saw something from a peer standpoint, that maybe they'll start thinking about it better, instead of as if they were being taught by, a dictator or something like that. So I think that.
I want to ask a question. So I'm doing some kind of different ways of trying to distribute my film. You're a teenager talking to teenagers. What are you doing to get that dialogue going around your film?
I think, I use teenagers in my films also. I mean, I don't hire people. I use my friends, people off the street, so they could feel connected to it, and that, it isn't some out-of-the-world place, that it's, someone they could see off the street or someone they could relate to or something like that. So.
Actually, I did have a question I want to ask Jessica before you finish. Byron and Nina both talked about the fact that, when the powers that be, or the industry that be in this case, doesn't approve of the message that you want to put out, you have to be prepared to step outside of it and do your thing anyway and get your film seen. As you think about your future and making films in your future, do you think about how important it might be to you to have your work viewed widely by a mass audience? And if so, how do you imagine that might take place?
I'm not really used to all the inner workings of getting all of my footage out there. Usually, I work under Joe, who's right there, and he helps me, and my film gets into national screenings and stuff like that. But I think I would like to try, and I think it would be more important, but I think it's not that important for more of a mass audience, but as long as you can touch an individual, it doesn't really matter the quantity, but yeah.
That's interesting. She mentioned Joe. For those of you who don't know, she's talking about Joseph Duellette, who runs the ICA Fast Forward program at the Institute of Contemporary Art, and he's in the audience with us today. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
And he was also at the Cambridge Center for the Arts and the Do It Your Damn Self Festival, which is a fabulous film festival that young people put on.
Yes. The longest running youth-produced film festival. I think I've got it right?
He should be up here. Yes, he should be up here.
So actually, I did want to, the question that I asked Jessica, I would like to throw it out to any of the other panelists who want to answer it, which is, how important is it for your work to be widely seen? How do you change people's minds if they don't even know where to find your work or how to get a hold of it?
Yeah. Some of the things I'm doing with The Healing Passage, it's a 90-minute documentary through which artists are looking at the present-day residuals from the slave trade and how they use their art to create healing. And I think it's a piece that it is proven to be a piece that generates dialogue. So some of the things I've done are to raise money. I said if people give $100 to the film, they will get a VHS copy of the film. We did that through the completion of the film and for about 6 months after that. If people gave more than that, then that extra money allowed me to give a copy to a teacher. So as I was going around doing focus groups and fundraisers, I was taking the list of names of teachers, librarians, people who work with teens, community centers, and now we're beginning to ship out a free copy to those people that they can show to that group that they're working with. Because I know from this film, it's the dialogue that comes out of it that's going to create the change. And we have to make a space for that. Some people have said, I took that film over to my parents' house and we watched it. Or I had a group of friends come in the other day and we put it on. That's what I want to happen. More than a film festival, and I love the Roxbury Film Festival, thank you, but more than a film festival, if people sit down and look at the film in the privacy of their homes, in a small group of people, and start a dialogue and make some decisions and maybe do something that the film generates, that's how the change starts. I think somewhere in the Great Society under Johnson, we got programmed about having the grant, having the program, having this big thing that we had to have in order to function. And when they took that away from us, a lot of organizations and programs fell apart. We have to go back to the way our ancestors operated when they didn't have anything, when they didn't have the grant, the program, the community center. We got to go back to how did they survive? How did they make this work? How did they produce us? Who are up here talking about, these wonderful things that we can do now. And it worked out of the sheer out-of-pocket, by any means necessary. We don't need a whole lot of folks. We need whoever's here are the people that are going to do the work. And the people are going to take the message and take it out to other people. So that's some of the things that I think are very important to our survival, whether it is a big film or whether it is a small project. There's an organization that I work with in LA called the Black Hollywood Education Resource Center. And they have something called the First Weekend Club. And what they have done is they have educated the community that in Hollywood, for the big films, the first weekend sets the box office. The number of people who come in and pay that ticket set the box office, and it determines how long that film is going to run, that very first weekend. So even though you may be busy and you got to take the kids to a basketball game and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to plan to see the film in 3 weeks, it may not be there in 3 weeks if we don't get our bodies there. And check the ticket, because sometimes if they're not happy with the politics and the political message in the film, you will pay for Hustle and Flow or whatever other film is, but you will get a ticket that has another film's name on it. The name that's on the ticket is its film that's getting credited with the box office money. So you need to learn to read that stub. So they now have chapters in 32 cities, and they do it all by email. A film that has a black star, black director, black message, black focal point is coming out through email. In 32 cities, they have chapters set up that will get people out to that film. And I don't think we have a key person in Boston. If somebody wants to step up the plate, we will hook that up. So there'll be 37 cities. So there are creative ways that we have to find, whether it is a major film or whether it's Jessica's small student film, to whatever we're saying. If you need to hear what we're saying, we have to find ways to get that message to you where you get to use the product that we're making.
I just want to make sure that, thank you very much for that. That was tremendously informative, and I hope that there's someone here who will take up Esperel's challenge to start the
I tried to
first
do it 10
weekend
years
club.
ago.
Okay.
Come on back.
Let's try again. So I just want to make sure that we have time for audience questions. So before I ask the panel any more questions, I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to jump in. If you have a question, once again, I will ask you to come to this microphone only because we need your voice to be picked up by the audio that's being recorded. Questions?
This is a great panel. I'm Carol Copeland Thomas. I have a radio program here in Boston called Focus on Empowerment on WB&W 1120 AM radio, and it's simulcast on the web too. I sit at panels like this and hear tremendous information and lots of resources. I guess I'm going to direct this to S. Pearl, just because of your experience and your background and the process that clearly you understand in terms of getting things changed. Do you know of anyone who is writing a book, a manual, that will literally show this process that needs to take place in order to impact change with advertisers, producers, and individuals in television and Hollywood? Is that something that you could possibly explore with other individuals? The process that you talked about in terms of the Black Anti-Defamation League and the key players and how you role played, that is brilliant in terms of what lots of cities and organizations and community groups need to do in order to systemically try to impact organizations. So that's my question about the documentation. In addition to books or websites, what process can someone link into so that if they're part of an organization, they'll know step 1, 2, 3, or 4?
Yeah. We did not write it. What I did do is when we closed down the organization, I had about 6 or 7 copies of all of our minutes and our newsletters bound. There's one at the Schaumburg. There's one at the Western States Black Research Library in Los Angeles, and I guess a few other private, personal people have them. I'm not aware of anyone writing that. I would be willing to dialogue and happy to dialogue with some people, who would want to do that. Because I think it's a very good point.
Yeah, it's
we
critical.
do say this over and over again at panels, and then it doesn't get to the next step. Yes, thank you. Good question.
I just wanted to respond to you too, Carol. I think that is an excellent point that you raised, and in keeping with your whole idea about empowerment. And I'm with you on that. I actually have a list of websites that I brought with me today, and if anybody wants them, you can email me and I'll be happy to send it to you. But really to encourage critical thinking and people who have been involved in similar kinds of struggles, maybe not shutting down a film, but definitely ways to think constructively and differently and to empower oneself to deal with the kinds of things that we encounter. So.
One of the things that I think, again, in keeping with the spirit of this panel and the information and suggestions, is here in Massachusetts to have a panel part of the 21st Century Black Massachusetts Conference next year. That's State Senator Diane Wilkerson always convenes. There's always a media element, and we're always flustered about, okay, what are the next steps? I can certainly see some kind of process or manual being put in place to teach community leaders in terms of how to empower themselves to affect change in the media.
And there is a book that's out of Boston College written by Charlotte Ryan called Primetime Activists, which works with community people to teach them exactly what the media process is. But in terms of really getting at the content. And I'm hoping that this panel is going to deal with the content of images. Just because that black folks are making images doesn't mean that they're better than what white folks are making. You know, I think content needs to be analyzed as well. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. I think critical thinking that she said is the key word. If you just drop those comments, you know, into your family, if you have a discussion. We were in the lobby last night, Beat the Drum. Everybody's saying it's a beautiful film, and they spoke the truth. I said, no, they didn't speak the truth. When they got time for the truth, they started singing Christian songs and went off onto a whole other thing, and they never talked about the truth in the film. And then some folks are saying, oh. So very often we see a film like Rise. You know, did you love the dancing? Yes. Halfway through that film, I knew that film was made by a white person. How did I know? Because all the stereotypes that put us in a box were being promoted. Black people are poor, they're on drugs, they're on welfare, ain't no daddy in the house. All of that was promoted over and over again in that film. So before I even went to the newspapers to see who made it, I knew. So that's the kind of critical thinking that we have to begin to do. Don't just accept what's coming at you. You have to analyze it. You have to find who made it, who said this. What is their background? Why did they say this? What did they have to gain by making this movie? And my question is, how come when we are trying to tell our own stories, how come so many of us are so willing to talk to the other and let them come into our lives with cameras, rather than letting a black filmmaker do that who might be more protective? We need to address that issue.
thank you.
Speaking of hustle and flow.
I didn't mean to mention that as an example.
No, that's okay. It's okay. No, because I saw that film, and my brother has been in television since forever. It almost killed him, so he was able to get out of there with disability. But he loved it so. What can I say? The part where Terrence Howard played the producer, and he was confronted by Tony Danton. Yeah. That segment where Tony Danton looked in the producer's eyes. Now, supposedly, the producer has some level of power in a television station to say up or down on either the dialogue, how it's scripted, or whatever. And Tony Danza let him know that he did not have the power.
Oh, you're talking about Crash.
Crash.
Did I say Hustle and Flow? Because he's in both.
That's right. Sorry, Crash. Crash. Because you were going, your faces were going, what is she talking about? Thank you for correcting me.
That's right.
Terrence Howard played in both those movies, but when he was the producer in Crash, and Tony Danza confronted him about how that script was going to go, that the black man was going to speak black.
Yep.
What choices did he have, other than the one he made at that point, to let him know and necessarily not get fired? What choices might he have had at that point when Tony Danza said, no, it's going to go this way because I'm the star?
Yeah. They want me to take that. What? Yeah. I had a war for 2 years at a cable company because I refused to hire any white camera people. And the reason why I did that is because none of the producers would hire any of my black interns, but they would hire the white interns. And I had a war for 2 years. And it was a mighty war. And who knows who won. I'm not there anymore, but neither are they. So, I mean, I think you have to be prepared, Connie, to go to battle, if indeed you want to stay in that environment. And it can take the form of an argument. It can take the form of you don't get called for the gigs. It can take the form of isolation. It can take all kinds of forms. But you have to be prepared to go to battle. And you have to have supporters, community supporters, and professional supporters. The professional ones are a little harder to do because people love their jobs, just over broke. They want to stay that way. And I'm talking about something very different. I'm talking about this is not normal what we're living in. And we got to change it. It's killing us. Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, it's killing us. So what are we going to do about it? Are we going to just, keep our mouths shut and keep the matrix going? Or are we going to challenge the status quo? And I think as Pearl raised a very good point, it's an excellent point, about returning to some communal values in the way that we got here in the first place. We weren't relying upon Hollywood to make it real for us. Oscar Micheaux ran all over the so-called chicken bone circuit, which I think is an interesting name for a circuit. And he brought his films from theater to theater to theater, and there are many people who have done the same thing with books and videos. I mean, barbershops and beauty salons are like the distribution network for so many things. Brother VCR over there is the king of the spoken word events in Boston. And Premiere, I mean, this brother turns out more spoken word events than anybody else I know. And the way he promotes it is word of mouth, in the barbershops, in the beauty salons, on the emails. I mean, you got to come up with an alternative strategy if indeed what you want to do is make change.
Any other questions from the audience? Anyone? It's making your way to the microphone.
Call them out.
VCR coming to the microphone.
Hi, greetings. I have a question regarding, I just want your opinion regarding certain films that a lot of us, black folks look at as positive, so to speak, because I always hear conversations when it comes down to certain films where they'll say...
We can't hear you.
Hello? Okay. No, I was just addressing about certain films, with your opinion on these particular films that a lot of us we see as a positive film, so to speak, because I hear conversations from a lot of folks. We always talking about how negative, Boys in the Hood and New Jack City and Men's Society is, but then we always end up pumping up movies like Best Man and The Wood and Soul Food. It's like this big, gigantic family of flicks. And we always miss out on some of the important films that we've been seeing, Sankofa, or we even mentioned about the Spook Who Sat by the Door or something like that. But we always talk about these, Morris Chestnut, it's not to put them out there, but Morris Chestnut / Gabrielle Union type films. And just want to, get an opinion on that and everything. So.
Anybody want to take that?
I know that a lot of people are going to go see Hustle and Flow who didn't go see Rosewood. And John Singleton put his career on the line to do Rosewood, to tell one of our stories, and we didn't support it. And that's not the first time that has happened. So as much as we can bitch about the stuff that's out here that's negative, that's the stuff that we're buying. That's the stuff that our community is getting in line to see. That's the stuff that they're duplicating and selling in the soul food restaurant under the table. Did you get your so-and-so for $10 instead of going to, Blockbuster and paying $20 for it? And I think we have to look at that reality and stop pretending it's not happening. Mm-hmm. So I think Crash is one of the, and it's not a black film in terms of being produced by blacks, although Don Cheadle was one of the producers of that. I think it's a brilliant film. Absolutely. I think it has a lot of issues. That's a film that I'd like to see. A friend of mine lives here in Boston, and she's a teacher, and she said she's going to try to get a copy, and she's trying to, the whole diversity thing is coming down in her school, but they're not really addressing the real issues, and she wants to show that film and let the young people, let the kids talk about what they see in that film, because their people are good and bad. And they, the person that's good at the beginning becomes bad, the person that's bad becomes good, and it's not, I'm going to be bad today, it's like, whoa, was that me? Did I do that? All of a sudden, things have shifted. And I think that's one of the things that makes the film so good. But we do have to look at what we don't talk about, and that is our desire for the hustles and flows, our desire for the black exploitation films, how quickly we get in line, how much box office is generated by us for the product that we then turn around and say, well, that was awful, but we're there, we're the ones buying it. So I think that's something we have to begin to be more honest with ourselves about.
I wanted to also respond to that too, and I think that what S. Pearl said is right on point. What Nina has said is right on point. What your name is Jessica, right? What Jessica said is, I mean, these are all great points that have been made, and I think the problem is that, you know, what we are seeing and what we are experiencing is just the dumbing down of American culture, the dumbing down of popular culture across the board. It's not even just with black film. It's with popular culture in general. The bar is just constantly and consistently being lowered and lowered and lowered, you know, and so I think I think we're just trapped. Our minds are colonized, and we tend to believe that, you know, if a movie comes out and it's not a part of the machine, it doesn't have millions of dollars in promotion, if it doesn't look a certain way, if it doesn't have a certain polish to it, if it doesn't have a certain sheen to it, then the movie is substandard. It's not a movie that's worth seeing. And, you know, to be honest with you, one of the reasons why it was so difficult for me to even respond to your question is because I don't really go to the movies that much anymore. But right. Because I refuse to support certain movies that don't resonate with me, or that I can sense just by the trailer that this is just another film that has this sort of cookie cutter sort of formula that reinscribe all of the historical stereotypes and characterizations and all these different things. I just don't bother to see them. I do feel, however, that those movies are important to see because that's what the larger culture is viewing. That's what the larger culture is digesting. So, you know, sometimes I'll rent it, or, you know, I'll find it somewhere else. Maybe I'll see it on a plane or something like that when I'm traveling, and I'll watch it because I feel like it's important to stay in tune with what people are watching. But I find that the most intelligent films, the films with the most sophistication, the films with the most nuance are the ones that, like, you know, that you see here at the Roxbury Film Festival and other film festivals. Films that maybe go straight to DVD or something like that. You know, I think about films like Control Room, Super Size Me, Outfoxed. You know, these are the type of films that the average, everyday person doesn't even really know about because it doesn't get the promotion, the marketing. They think of it, they hear about it, they consider it to be fringe, you know, like something that's on some other stuff. You know what I mean? Something that, you know, it's going to make me think too much. You know what I mean? And I'm sorry.
Look what we did with Sankofa, though.
Yeah.
I mean, Sankofa spoke to us.
Right.
And we knew it, and we made it happen.
I saw Sankofa like 20 times when it was over down in Cambridge.
Yeah. Gang members were coming into Sankofa.
Yeah.
People were bringing their grandmamas into Sankofa. Why was that different? Okay? Why was that different? We did word of mouth. He didn't have all the things you're talking about. He was set up in a community center way out in Watts, was where the publicity office was when they hit L.A. Okay? Nobody has ever had their publicity office or promotion office out in Watts for a film they're trying to market in Hollywood. But the film spoke to us. And we responded to it differently than we had responded to any other film in a long time. So whenever we say, well, it has to be this or that, I say, no. We latched on to Sankofa. We made Sankofa happen. They did tricks in Hollywood, like they'd post the times and then they would change the screening times because they were getting upset about so many black people there. What they didn't realize was there was a really good soul food restaurant right around the corner. So everybody would go over there and chill until the time of the actual film showed up, no matter how many times they changed it. There was a line, there was a full house there. So we can do it for that film, we can do it for other films.
But as Pearl, you raised an excellent point about Sankofa. I interviewed Haile Garima a couple of times when he came here to Boston with his film. And the process that he went through to get that film done, you know, on 3 continents was incredible. Yeah. But then the distribution process was not your Hollyweird distribution process. He had a network of people that in different cities, people who were committed. In this city, it was Claire Andrade Watkins, a professor over at Emerson College, who was determined and had a network of people that she connected to, and we were determined. We knew that if people came to see the film once, that they would then bring others to come and see the film. I think the film Crash, even though it's not made specifically by a black director, but it's got Don Cheadle as a producer, that's another kind of film like that. It doesn't get that kind of marketing, it doesn't get that kind of distribution, but it's in the theaters still. And people it's got packed audiences because it's a good film, it's got good content, and it speaks to the people. And the final thing I just want to say off of that is that it's really important for us not to be trapped in genres, to think that, he's a spoken word artist and he's a filmmaker and she makes documentaries, so I can't really connect. We've got to look at the mediums of expression as mediums of expression, that no line between theater and music and film and poetry, and it's expression. We come out of an oral tradition, many of us, in fact all of us if you go back far enough, and so where are these lines coming from? These lines are created for exploitation purposes, for divide and conquer purposes. So if you want to buy into that, more power, more grease to your elbow, but I'm against you.
I just wanted to add one thing and then maybe ask Jessica a question. In 1976, I was at a dinner with Brock Peters and Minister Louis Farrakhan. And Farrakhan was saying then that the black Muslims were developing a plan to put a black-owned movie theater in every city. Okay? It never happened. So we have to look at why, and why can't that begin to happen now? There is a sister who owns a theater in Oakland, California. The places where we have such a heavy population, particularly in the South, why can't we have a small theater in every city? Now, the industry is set up to make that not happen, because even when Magic Johnson opened his theater chain, he had to go to battle because they were not allowing him to have the first-run films when they opened. When he first opened, for about the first 6 months, he was getting films after they had been open for 3 or 4 weeks, and he literally had to go to court. So the industry is not set up in our favor for that. But if Magic Johnson can go to court and win and then continue to open up theaters, then we can do the same thing. Maybe we do it through Magic, maybe we do it through somebody else, maybe we do it independently, but it can be done. And this is another thing. Let's look at the creative ways that we can make our goal happen. And that is, people are putting out product that has messages that we need to see that are not controlled by the corporations. How do we get them to you? How do we get our message and our ideas to a place where you can see them? Ben Caldwell, a filmmaker in LA, has a place where the young people come in and do their animation, do their videos, do their CDs, and they finally said to him, that room over there where you got that, you got to clean that out. We're setting up a store. And they made him set up a store. They came in, put in the shelves, they worked, painted it, and now they're selling their own DVDs and their CDs out of this little store. Now they got T-shirts, they got little African artifacts. It keeps expanding. Every time you go in there, it's expanded. Because they saw a way to reach their population, and their population is we sell it out of our backpacks.
That's right.
We sell it out of our backpacks, and they are selling. They're getting their message out. So I wanted to ask Jessica if there was a film that you had seen that had influenced you very strongly as a filmmaker, because we need to know what our young people are responding to.
I don't think there could be necessarily one film for me, but I guess I would say mostly documentaries and films like Crash, just anything that gets a topic out there that most people won't talk about, or they just have one general view of, and as long as it's thought-provoking, then that's inspirational.
Before you go, Brian, I just want to say we'll probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 more audience questions. So if you have a question, can you please come to the microphone, and I'll let you continue with your comment.
Absolutely.
Jessica, I wanted to know, you had mentioned something about, the images that we're bombarded by, in mainstream television today. And I just want to know, and I hope this is not an unfair question, but how do, your friends your age interpret the the images, the type of images that you see on television, whether it's, you know, MTV or BET, television commercials and things like that. I mean, how do you feel like your friends are responding to the way, you know, the media bombards us with the same sort of images daily, you know? Or do you even talk about it at all?
They'll tell me things like movies they'll see or shows they watch and their opinions on it, but we don't really discuss like their views politically and stuff like that. But I think some of my friends, they just think of it as pure entertainment, and they don't really think of issues or if it's offensive to anyone other than themselves or if it's hurtful, and that they just laugh it off. And personally, I don't watch that kind of stuff, and even if it doesn't affect me as a woman or an Asian person or anything, it still hurts and it's offensive and degrading, and I think that a lot of them let it slide because they can't see it outside of their standpoint, and I think that that's something that they should really think about, about others.
Thanks, Jessica. Actually, I want to ask the panelists themselves. You asked Jessica how her friends interpret some of the images that they see. I know many of you, or most of you, have done work and do work with young people. And maybe you can talk to those of the audience members there who maybe also do work with young people or have children or want to know how is it that you reach young people and talk to them about the images that they're seeing. How do we teach them how to interpret what they're seeing instead of just ingesting it as it is?
Yeah. There are a lot of people in this audience I know that have worked and still do work with young people and work with them to have their voices heard. I think I used to teach media production, television and radio production, and I stopped. I stopped teaching that because I realized that if I taught production without first going into critical thinking and media literacy, that most people, young and not so young, would pick up the loaded gun and point it to their heads and blow it off. And that really there had to be like education around what these devices were that you were dealing with, what these images were, what these messages were, what the impact of it could be. Because as young people, I find, and not so young people also struggle around issues of self-esteem and self-worth and self-value. And where do they learn these things? They learn them at home, or maybe their parents aren't home. So who are their parents then? Television, radio, the music videos, the internet. I mean, we've got games now where young people can play war games, decapitating people and shooting people, and in the middle of the process, they can sign up and join the army online. And where's the discussion around that? You know, where is the deconstruction around that? The institute that I helped coordinate, that the executive director for that institute is sitting in the audience. Maybe she'll ask a question. I won't put her on the spot. But that institute raised those kinds of issues with young people, with organizers, and with teachers. You know, deconstructing the military-industrial complex, deconstructing the prison-industrial complex, deconstructing many issues of social justice in the society against all of us. You know, and not just on a local level, but on a national level and an international level. And if we just consume the diet, and young people are going to do what we do. You know, they're looking at us, not what we say, but what we do. So in my household, I got a lot of TVs, but they're not on that much. My kids watch TV. I let them watch TV now because they've been indoctrinated by me. The parents are the first teacher. And so that responsibility is a sacred responsibility. And then the teachers in school should be the second level of teaching. And that is also a sacred responsibility. But teachers are the least paid, and a lot of them are there just to collect their retirement benefits. You know, they don't really care about the information. But there are many dedicated teachers at the same time, and they don't get a lot of support. So how do you reach the young people, and how do you help them to get their messages out? I think you got to help them think, you know, and you don't tell them what to think. You ask questions, and you listen to what they have to say. You engage in dialogue. And I think that's so difficult in this society, to engage in dialogue. I mean, look at us. We're the experts sitting on the panel, and you're the audience. You know, I mean, if it's equal, then we'd all be on the same level, and we'd be engaged in a dialogue, not me and my monologue. I could talk forever. So, you know, but I can also listen, you know. I can also listen.
One of my friends who was concerned about what her daughter was listening to got very interested in a record. She says, that sounds so interesting. She said, do you have the lyrics to that? And her daughter said, yes. She said, well, are they on the internet? And her daughter said, oh, yeah. She said, could you download them? So her daughter downloaded the lyrics, and then she said, would you read them? And as her daughter stood there actually reading the lyrics to her mother, the little girl, teenager, began to just kind of crumble. Like, that solved that problem. That was the end of that group and that record being heard in the house. Because just through that exercise, the little girl realized what she was actually listening to and how it sounded out in the world. And there was no reprimand. There was no, put down about the CD. Just, I'm very interested. You read those to me. And, end of problem. So, again, as community and family members, we have to be extremely creative about how we tune in to the young people and get that dialogue going. How do you get their attention? How do you get that little message into them?
Well, I think that the points that were made were right on point. I can just say ditto. I think media literacy is the key. Deconstructing images. I took a class when I was in college called Blacks in the Media and the Press, and it was taught by Dr. Elizabeth Hadley Freiberg, and it changed my mind. It changed the way I viewed television. It changed the way I viewed sitcoms. It changed the way I watched movies. It totally unshackled my mind in terms of what it was that I was digesting, and it made me look at movies and films and television and even listen to things much more critically. And I just think that the work that, she did in that classroom is what has to happen all over the country. There needs to be media literacy institutes all over the country. And again, I want to talk to Nina some more about the way that her father raised her, in terms of, was sitting in the back of the room and making these. Well, because I think about that all the time. I don't have any kids yet, but how am I going to raise my own children when it comes to watching television? Because, I'm older. I have a certain sensibility now. I question and challenge, but I know that my own children are going to have their own evolution process in terms, and they're not going to be where I am. So, how do I get my own children to be critical thinkers without being overbearing, without making them be so resentful of me that they begin to, resist and just completely go to the opposite end of the spectrum. You know what I mean? But I think it's kind of what you also said, is that you have to be clever, you have to be shrewd, and you have to be patient and understanding that not everybody is where you are. One of the things that I do when I'm working with boys and men is that I just try and reach boys and men where they are. I try to be as honest as possible. I talk about my own self, not in a way that makes me seem like I'm so perfect or great, but talk about, my own faults and frailties and things that I've done that, sort of bought into a certain way of thinking and acting and behaving and things like that. And so I think that helps them to identify with me and allows them to sort of listen to what I have to say. Mm-hmm. Are we running out of time? Yeah. Is that the time person?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, on that note, I just want to say personally, if we're closing now, that it was an honor to be on this panel with these very smart, intelligent people. And, I think you all are just beautiful people, and I support everything. Yeah.
Special thanks to all of our panelists. Thank you, Nina, Byron, S. Pearl, and Jessica. And I especially want to thank S. Pearl because she stepped in at the last minute for a last-minute request, and I really appreciate it, and we enjoyed hearing all your commentary. Thank you. Come to the Healing Passage tomorrow at the MFA at 3 p.m.